Yeah, I can hear you. You can hear. Hey, everybody. Always Booking Comedy. Mark Masters. We got Bill Lake from, where are you in New York?
I am in Binghamton, New York.
Binghamton. That's a fun word to say. Binghamton,
Yes, not
New York.
Binghamton, as many from the southern part of the state call it Binghamton, but it's Binghamton.
Got it. Got it. Is that where Chat GPT lives these days? In the Binghamtons?
Who's that?
That's
Oh,
a
yeah, yeah.
it's a search engine joke. All
No,
right.
no,
Already bombing. Always bombing comedy right here. How are you today, Bill?
Good. How are you doing?
Good. I'm awesome. All right. We had like some kind of agenda. Let's try and get more. I'm talking to myself right now. Let's try and get organized. I just like flew. I just realized about the time. All right. Yeah, great. So let's start by how did you get into comedy, Bill? Tell us about your origin story.
I actually got into comedy pretty late. I started doing stand-up when I was 53, but I had been doing some writing prior to that. In my 40s, I was fortunate enough to be a freelance monologue joke contributor, and I wrote for Craig Ferguson and David Letterman. And I will mention Saturday Night Live, although that totaled 2 jokes over 2 seasons, so I don't usually use that credit.
Do you remember one of the jokes?
Oh God, they were so topical. John McCain was running for president.
Okay.
John McCain took credit for inventing the iPod or something like that, and today he tried to withdraw $20 from it. Something like that. It was a senior citizen joke.
Okay.
Yeah,
Got
not a great one, but anyway. So yeah, I'd been doing some writing for a while. Always enamored of stand-up since my 20s, and I'm old enough, grew up watching the old Tonight Show and with Johnny Carson and seeing stand-up on there. And finally, around 53, I'm like, well, if I'm ever going to give this a shot, I might as well go.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
How long ago was that?
Oh, now you're trying to get me to say how old I am?
No, well, I'm trying to get you not to say that, but also
This is my 8th year.
okay, all right.
Yeah.
In that 5 to 10 range.
Yes.
Cool. And I've seen Bill perform. He's hilarious. I saw
Thank
him
you.
at the Rubber City Comedy Festival, and your ice hockey joke just killed me. It
Oh,
was so
thanks.
good, so good. Okay, so what did you do? You went to an open mic. You wrote some jokes
Yeah,
in
we
a
didn't have
notebook.
much. Yeah, we don't have much of a comedy scene in my area in terms of mics. We still have one mic. And at first it was only every other week. I was also in a band at the same time. That same night that we had band practice was the open mic. So I think for the first 6 months, I probably only went to the mic once a month. So the first 6 months, year was pretty slow going like everybody. And it took me a good year and a half to figure out what kind of stuff I wanted to write. But yeah, I've been sticking to it since then pretty consistently.
Nice. How many mics a week can you do these days? And being
Depends how
Binghamton.
far I want to drive.
Okay.
We still just have the one local one, and then there's a new monthly one. And if I want to drive, let's see, a minimum of 70 miles, I can do other mics in upstate New York. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Is 70 miles like? Can you do that in an hour, or is that
Yeah,
like
that's not bad. And
okay?
I have a Prius, bought it specifically for the reason of all the miles I was putting on with comedy, so it's not so bad.
Nice. So how far are you from like other major markets? Like if you want to go to New York City or
Yeah,
Philly or Boston.
it's probably a 3.5 hour drive, good timing, to New York City, but you can't exactly zip in and out of the city. So
Right.
across, excuse me, across upstate, directly north of me, about an hour is Syracuse. They have a Funny Bone there. Albany is about 2 hours away. They also have a Funny Bone and a pretty good, healthy comedy scene to the west. Rochester, 2.5 hours. They have Comedy at the Carlson up there. That's a nice club, brings in big headliners. And then if I want to go about 200 miles northwest to Buffalo, and they have a Helium Club there and a really
Okay.
nice scene there. So a lot of us do a lot of driving in upstate, and the scenes crisscross a lot, and we have each other on each other's shows, which is nice.
That's awesome. So that's a good segue. Great transition. So you run some shows, I think.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about a venue you've set up? Maybe a funny story, good story, bad story?
Sure. Yeah, we have a small club here in Binghamton. We call it the Boho Comedy Club. We do only one show a month, still one Saturday a month, but we bring a lot of comics up from New York City. Usually people, maybe they've got like one late night under their belts, not national names, but a nice quality of comedy. But that came out of my friend Jordy, who unfortunately has passed away since then. But my friend Jordy and another guy, Mike, and myself. For several years, we're doing every kind of show possible, backyards, hooking up with whatever venue. And Jordy had the idea we were going to do a pop-up comedy club. And then it turned out the first venue we worked with, we had such a successful show, they actually wanted to do it with us permanently. So we are in, despite what it sounds like, it is a very nice room. It is in a lower level of a hotel, but it's not one of those conference rooms. It's a nice little like former bar space that they let us paint the walls and put up our own our backdrop and stage. And it's been nice. It's been successful. So we do that about once a month.
Do
And
you set it up from scratch every month, or does this
yeah,
stuff?
we
Yeah.
bring out because we share the space with the hotel, so they will use the space for other events, and then we haul all of our tables and chairs out and our sound system. But we've got it down that we can do it in about, an hour and a half now. And
And
we
do you
fact
own all your tables and chairs?
yeah, yeah.
This is
Uh,
a topic of interest for me recently. How
we
did you get
do.
them?
Yeah, so back when it started, Jordy, whose idea it was, ran a Kickstarter, and that was part of the funding of it was to buy tables, chairs, lighting. I think they're IKEA.
Okay, that's what I just got a bunch of IKEA chairs.
But we bought 20 tables and 80 chairs and had to assemble them all by hand and occasionally have to retighten them. But but it works and it's nice because it's the only really permanent comedy space in Binghamton. Everything else is there are other independently produced shows, but they're mostly pop-ups at various venues that aren't necessarily, set up for comedy. So we're pretty proud of it. We sweat it out every week when we get 3 days before the date and look at the ticket sales. And then it's a last minute thing. And,
Yeah.
it ends
You
up,
sell out sometimes?
yeah, we do. For us, a sellout, we consider about 80 people, 80 to 100 people. But yeah,
What
it's,
do you do when you have 100 if you have 80 chairs? People
we can
just stand?
accommodate that. Yeah, we grab some stuff from the hotel,
Okay,
bring in some bigger
nice.
tables. It's a good
How
problem to have.
do you ticket with Eventbrite, or what are you using for ticketing?
Yes, we do go through Eventbrite. Yeah.
Okay, nice. Do you pass the fees on, or do
No,
you
we
pay
don't.
them?
And
No? Okay.
but the nice thing is we have an probably unusual arrangement with the venue, with the hotel. As anybody knows that does comedy, clubs make all their money on food and drinks.
Yeah.
We have a built-in bar in the space and table service for food, but the hotel takes all the food and drink. So that's how they make their
Yeah.
money. And then we take the ticket sales, all the
Yeah,
ticket
the
sales.
door.
And we manage to keep our expenses down. So it's been profitable. The three of us that are part of the sort of management team, fortunately, don't have to rely on the club for our income. It's a side interest, so we're able to put the money that we make back into the club and new
Does
equipment.
does the hotel hook you up with rooms for a headliner or other comics?
That was not negotiated at the beginning. They give us a discount, but that's been a weird sticking point. That just seems like that should have been a given,
Yeah,
but whatever.
especially, when it's not busy. Like, maybe they're sold out
They are,
some.
yeah, they're fairly busy, or at least they claim to be, but,
Yeah,
they've been good to us. They just leave us alone. They're not even present. They trust us
yeah.
to do the whole thing on ourselves. So it's a good arrangement
And
overall.
any other tricks like, show length or, number of comics, anything that you think makes the show successful?
It's a traditional host feature, headliner. I think what we've done is we've found a pocket, sort of a level of comic where, like I said, they have maybe late night under their belt, but we're not bringing in Mark Normand, and we're not spending
Right.
thousands of
Who's
dollars.
in the last 6 months, who's somebody who
Uh,
stands out?
so I
Who's good?
think you had Steven Rogers out at the Vale Comedy.
Yeah, he's great.
Yeah, so
Terrific.
Steven's a friend of mine, but I'd say Steven's that level, opens for
Okay.
someone big, is
Yep.
starting, has been headlining by himself for like a year.
Mhm.
And it's, the tricky part is to try to bring comics up from the city who aren't necessarily touring because they're not going to want to give up a full weekend to come and
Right.
do two show night. But so far we've been pretty good with that. We've had Ron and Hirschberg.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, Caitlin Palufo, actually Steven's
Oh, she's
girlfriend.
great.
Yeah, that
Hilarious.
level we had one of our favorites we've brought back is Al Park, who's out of Boston. Al,
Huh.
yeah, Al,
PARK?
Yeah, Al has
Okay.
won when a few years ago, Al won the Cleveland and the Boston festivals, right? One right after the other, and he's amazing. So that's sort
Awesome.
of our level.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. No, those are great headliners. I can't even get Run On, you know?
Well, you have a
I've tried to
longer,
reach out to him and book him, but for him or for any New York comics, they got to fly all the way to
right.
Colorado, and
Yeah,
so
that's
it's
an
like,
advantage we have. We are close enough that if they don't necessarily ask for a room, they can come up and drive back that night
right.
and get back into the
And it's
city.
a
So
weekend show. Is it like a Friday or
it's
Saturday?
always a Saturday.
Okay.
That's part of what we're still learning, but I think we've settled into our niche that Binghamton's not a hugely populous city. I think we're about 45, 50,000 people, and the surrounding suburbs were maybe 150. So we're still trying to figure out how many comedy fans we have. So far, we haven't been brave enough to pull the trigger on like a Friday, Saturday weekend because we're just not sure we have
Right.
that many fans.
Yeah.
So we'd rather have a packed show, do 2 shows and have it be packed.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's transition into you as a comic and an outstanding booking win you've had over the last 8 years. It could be something really tiny 7 years ago, or something big recently,
Um,
something you're really proud of, excited about.
I've had, we talk about driving and going and doing maybe a mic at a club or doing a guest spot. I've had some nice things come out of guest spots.
Okay.
Uh, in fact, we mentioned Steven Rogers. My wife and I drove out to Jamestown, New York, which is well over 200 miles from where we are, to see Steve perform there at the Tropicana Room at the National Comedy Center. Which, by the way, if I plug it all the time, if people don't know about the National Comedy Center in Jamestown, New York, just south of Buffalo, it's sort of like the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame for comedy, minus the
Yeah, it looks
voting in.
so cool.
Oh,
And
it's
that's where
so
he filmed his special, right?
yeah, and
Yeah.
very high tech. They've put a ton of money into it. They have things as a comic, you'll appreciate this. I stood there staring at this. They've fortunately gotten the children of some of the greats, like Carlin's children, to donate items. So there's a display of George Carlin where there's literally his notebook pages on the wall. So if you're a comedy geek, go there and plan on spending probably 2 days to go through it. But Stephen was doing a gig out there. My wife and I went out to watch, and Steve was nice enough to throw me a guest spot on that show.
Oh, wow.
And I made a decent impression, and they brought me back to the Tropicana Room to co-headline with actually Al Park. And so that was kind of I felt like a big shot for the first time in my life where I got a hotel room and I headlined and my face was on the building. And
That's
so that was
amazing.
nice. Yeah, out of a guest spot. So, you know, I always say to younger, like people starting out, try for those things, but make sure you're ready when you get them
Yeah.
to bring it on that 5 minutes, and things will happen. So I've had that happen a couple times with clubs. And again, I'll plug a really great club I love in Wilmington, North Carolina, the Dead Crow Comedy Club.
Okay.
About 3 years ago, I went down there and I did a 3-minute set on an open mic, and they gave me a feature weekend out of that. So
Wow. Holy
yeah,
cow.
so those are the good ones. And then there's the
Yeah.
drives, the 3 and 4 hour
So
drives
then, do
where
you drive to Wilmington or do you fly?
my wife and I go down there to vacation at the
Okay,
beginning of the
perfect.
year for a while. So yeah, it's the closest city to where we are. And that club is just, I can't say enough about that club and the scene down there too. If anybody's ever passing through Wilmington, do their open mic on Thursday nights at the club. They get 40 or 50 pedestrians to come out to the mic. It's
Yeah.
amazing, and really nice, supportive group of comedians and also the people that run the club.
That's so cool. That's terrific. So when you get those opportunities, how do you use those? Like, let's take the Tropicana room. Uh, how did you like, are you trying to leverage that to go one step further? Like, do you have tape that from your headlining, or cool photos, or, because you went from the guest spot to the next thing. Like, what's after that?
Yeah. I mean, I want to say 2018 or 2019. So pre-pandemic. So all of us sort of lost some momentum after that, but it's definitely sort of the thing I use as maybe almost top of the line credit. And the photo looks cool because the building has a gigantic digital marquee out front with your face on it. So that's a prominent picture on my website. And I don't know how many people have heard of the place, but it's nice to say headline the National Comedy Center.
Oh, yeah.
It sounds good. So I can't pinpoint necessarily other bookings that came out of that credit. Although I did make some friends with some comics in the Jamestown area and the Buffalo area, which is nearby, which, have resulted in some other gigs. Talk about being ready. At the time they gave me that, they offered me the full headlining weekend, and I honestly didn't have 45 minutes. So we split it up to do a 30-30. And so I couldn't necessarily just say, all right, I'm out on the road, doing an hour.
Right.
But yeah, it was a nice credit at the time. And I think Al, despite all of his great credits, I think he uses that one pretty prominently in his resume as well.
That's awesome. All right,
Yeah.
we got an audience question here
Okay.
from the Carolinas, actually. If you aren't ready for a spot, do you think that opportunity vanishes? Should you try anyway and learn from your mistakes?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I would wait. I think it's worse to make a bad impression, especially if it's at a club. If it's an independent producer in your area, that may not be such a big deal. But if you get the first chance to go on stage at a club in your area and they are watching, uh, GMs have a lot to think about, and they have a lot of people contacting them and getting inundated with emails all the time. So if they do give you the 5-minute spot and they watch, and you don't really bring it, then maybe wait. And I know everybody wants to do it right away. You
Yeah.
want to jump on there, but you also have to think, if you do a 5-minute spot and they give you a hosting weekend, do you have 10? Do you have 15? Or God forbid, I mean, in a good way, they give you a feature weekend. Do you have the 20? So
Yeah.
it's tough to not be impatient and want to push forward. But
Yeah, a
yeah,
good way to, I think about that is often in your local scene, it takes a very long time to move up the ladder,
yeah,
longer than distant markets from your scene, because everybody has seen you be bad at the open mics. And I do
right,
this myself. I see other comics, they're bad, and then maybe 3 years will go by, but in my head, I still remember them as a bad comic. And
yeah,
it's hard to give them a fresh viewing,
yeah,
because you kind of like watch them, but you're not really paying attention because you're too hard on these people because you've seen them be bad. So yeah,
yeah,
I kind of agree with you, Bill, that if you can avoid being seen as long as possible, like a spring that's ready to be sprung,
yeah.
it's compressing. Uh,
Yeah, I mean, there's that old axiom about the first impression, right? So, yeah, I would wait.
yeah,
Although it's tough. It's tough if the opportunity comes up because everybody wants to move forward very quickly. And even with our club in town, there's a lot of people. They ask us about whether we're going to have an open mic. Even people I've never seen come to the other local open mic, because I think honestly, people who haven't been doing comedy for very long or just starting think they're literally going to step on stage, do one open mic, and they're going to end up getting booked, in a legitimate club, and doesn't necessarily work like that.
right, yeah. Okay, let's go back to show running. How about this? Have you ever had a bad customer service interaction where like somebody was just furious about something?
Uh, we've been pretty lucky with that at our club. I think we've only kicked out 2 people in 3 years. So we have fairly. This is going to be a
Were they just
boring
being
story.
loud, drunk,
Just
obnoxious?
drunk. They were drunk. They were staying in the hotel and had been pre-gaming before they came down. Uh, yeah, I don't know. That's very boring. I've been lucky enough that we've
Okay, well,
had
no, that's
decent.
great. That's terrific.
I have terrible show running story about a show that myself and my friends decided to create. Was also the worst set of my life. Again, my two partners previously, Jordy and Mike. This other guy, Mike does musical comedy. He has a guitar. So Mike has a local brewery that it's sort of his cheers. It's where he hangs out. So one night Mike is there with 12 or 15 people that he knows, and they all know he does comedy. They're like, Mike, do you have your gear in the car? Why don't you come in and set up and do a set for us, an impromptu set, which he did. And it went amazing because it was almost like a party. So Mike comes to Jordy and I and says, guys, I have a great new idea for shows. We're going to call it Guerrilla Comedy, Guerilla. And we are going to only tell the venue that we're going to show up. Yeah, you know, not the audience. And we're just going to spring a comedy show on them. So we managed to talk a venue into doing it. It's probably a venue everybody has in a decent sized town, where someone buys an old service station and turns it into like a
Yeah,
brewery slash. So that's what
super
this
hip.
is. So, right. So concrete floors, open ceiling, metal ceiling, terrible for sound. Also, they open their garage doors and have people sitting out on the patio. So it's warm weather. The place is jammed. There's probably 100 people there talking, socializing, having a great time. We go set up in the corner. Mike goes first. Mike could at least get people's attention because he has an electric guitar and an amp.
Right.
Get some mild attention. And then I go up. I'm fairly quiet on stage. I tell a lot of short jokes. I think I had 15 minutes planned. I was done in 7 minutes. I saw one table about 30 feet away watching me, but it's that thing where I would be pissed off too, because you're there to socialize and talk to your friends. Now there's some idiot on a microphone.
Right.
As I talk louder, they talk louder, I talk louder. The only time I ever lost my cool on stage, I was very unprofessional. I just at one point said into the mic, some of these jokes are pretty funny if you guys listen. But it was totally on us, totally a horrible idea. It's what we still reference as our worst idea ever. And yeah, that
That's
was
so hilarious. Instead of don't tell comedy, it's like don't know comedy.
yeah.
Nobody knows there's going to be a show.
Don't tell anyone.
Yeah.
We got that formula wrong. It wasn't don't tell them where the show was and that there was going to be a show. We told them, we didn't tell them anything, not even who's
Right.
going to be on the show,
Yeah.
but where that it was going to be here when you're trying to have a
that's
quiet dinner
hilarious.
with your date.
Did you make any money? Did the venue pay you?
I don't remember. I wasn't part of the financial end of it. The funny thing is right around the street at a major venue, a forum we have in Binghamton, I think Kevin James was there that night. So I
Oh.
literally did my set and went around the corner to see Kevin James. Jordy and Mike had the cojones to try another set later on. And I don't think that went any better, but
Wow.
what a disastrous idea. Guerrilla comedy. It was
Guerrilla comedy. Don't do it.
comedy.
That's a bad idea.
Yes.
Okay, let's move into a road comedy story. You told a couple, kind of.
Yeah. I'll give away the ending to this because I think it actually makes the story better. The gig itself ended up being much better than it should have been.
Okay.
The actual show, but the parameters of leading up to it. So again, this is going back 5 or 6 years. I hadn't ever headlined. Steven Rogers, the name comes up again. I threw a gig my way to headline, but again, I didn't have enough time. So I rounded up 2 other guys and we decided to split the hour 20, and it was going to be $200 a piece, which I think was probably the most we'd ever been paid. I'm building up why we would accept this gig.
Sure.
And it was a corporate gig, which also seemed appealing. Okay, that's my first corporate gig. I can say I've done one of those. I think my drive was close to 300 miles. I'm going to leave out some specifics in the story, but my drive was about 300 miles. But because of the kind of terrain, I had to go into the mountains. It took about 4 hours. I showed up the night before the gig. It was I pull into the address. They told us magnificent, huge sort of think Twin Peaks kind of lodge.
Okay.
I walk in, I'm like, oh, this is cool. Like, this is really nice. The woman who organized the gig finds me, and I said something about they were giving us a hotel room. Also, we felt like a big deal, even though we were splitting a hotel room between 3 of us, 2 beds and a cot. And by the way, the third member of our third comic was having to come about 6 or 7 hours from another gig he was doing the night before. And he's like, I'll get there at 3 or 4 a.m. So I meet with her and I said, this is pretty cool. I said something about the room. She goes, oh no, you guys are across the street. And she points across the street to a 1-story cinder block Motel 6 looking place, which was part of this bigger place, but not, not
it was the
same.
minor leagues.
So I had dinner outside and this town lost power during dinner. By the way, we are looking forward to a gig the next day at 10 a.m. So prime time for comedy. I go over across the street to the hotel. I'm the only one there of the 3 comics. I've got my phone with my flashlight on. I go into this little sort of 1-story motel-y thing. Now we get into like red rum. The walls are literally red. The walls are red in the hallway. I'm terrified. There's not another person walking down this long hallway to find our room. I jump back at one point because I see someone walking toward me until I realize that's my reflection in a mirror at the end of the hall, which was creepy enough. But if 2 girls had come around in big wheels around the corner and said red rum, I would not have been surprised. So I go into the room and it's okay. And it's at least got a sliding glass door and there's like a lake behind there. But I'm texting my other friend, Jason, and he isn't there yet. I'm look, dude, the power's out in town. I will be sitting outside the room on a picnic table so you can find me and I'll let you in. So he comes, I let him in. Then it got really very strange. The person who was the liaison between us and the organization came to her, texted us and asked if she could stop by our room to talk about the gig. Should have been like a 5-minute conversation. Uh, she stayed a very awkwardly long time with two men in the room. Jason was sitting on one bed. I was sitting on the other bed. She was sitting on a chair, uh, wearing a skirt, honestly, that was way too short, and letting us know that basically her husband and her did not have sex anymore. And we're in the dark. We're also in the dark, except for our phones lighting each other up. And
She's there for a free therapy session.
I don't know. And so Justin and I are secretly messaging each other on our phones, like, what is going on here? It was very odd. And she finally left and we tried to get some sleep. And then our other friend shows up at like 3 a.m. and had to sleep on a cot. And then the gig itself, 10 a.m. in a conference room in the most sterile bowling alley type carpet conference room in a hotel with recessed fluorescent lighting and a microphone on a podium. The organization we were doing the show for was there for an entire week of training. So they weren't there. They weren't there of their own volition. And they were a group of accountants.
Okay.
So you would also think they're not necessarily going to be the most lively crowd. We're standing outside the gig at 10 a.m. and we look in there and literally everybody looks like your elementary school librarian. They've all got their little packet for the weekend and their pen and they're all sitting there with their hands crossed. I was like, this is going to be a disaster. And then the topper was Jason, one of the three comics, is black. And I think about the only black person I'd seen in 100 miles of where we were. A woman comes out of the room that's with the organization and looks directly at him, even though we're all three standing together talking about comedy, and says, do you think we could get some more chairs in there?
Oh,
So
geez.
she assumed he worked for the hotel. And honestly, the gig went well. He got some laughs out of that. He roasted her a little bit, but the parameters of the whole thing, people would say, why did you do that?
Yeah.
And then the next day, my drive home took longer. It was about 97 degrees that day. I was on an exposed highway the entire way home. I had a Jeep Wrangler at the time with a black soft top, which I couldn't put down because I would have burned up. So
Right.
instead of roasting me, I had my air conditioning blasting on me the entire time. I went through 3 tanks of gas. The only part of me that was cool was the front. My back was sweating. It actually inspired me to trade my Jeep in and get this Prius that I have now because,
Yeah.
but you know what? We were like $200 and we're sort of co-headlining and it's a
Yeah. That's
corporate
exciting.
and the
That's
gig
pretty cool.
honestly was fine. The gig was fine, but yeah,
That's a great story. That's hilarious. And funny
that was
about the car too. It's interesting how comedians they know a lot about road trips and
oh yeah.
how to spend a lot of time in a car. I'm trying to figure out right now. I have some shows in Bend, Oregon
Mhm.
this summer, and I'm in Denver, and it's like a 2-day drive. It's like 20 hours,
Yeah.
and I kind of want to drive because I want to do some other shows in Washington, Oregon area. But I also don't really want to drive 20 hours both ways,
No, I
like
know.
basically within a week, drive 40 hours.
Yeah,
Uh,
I think the first the first 4 years I had the Prius before 2020, I think I was averaging 23,000 miles a year on it. So that's leveled out a little bit, but yeah, I've put 110,000 miles on it in 5 years or 6 years, which is way
Incredible.
above average.
Yeah, that's wild. That's wild.
Yeah.
All right, well, we got to wrap this up, Bill. This has been really interesting, and you got a lot of
Yeah.
great details and funny stories. Let's start with your website that you mentioned. Where can people see that pretty picture?
Huh. Yeah, BillLakeComedy.com, and then on every other social media platform, I'm particularly trying to build up some following on Instagram and YouTube. I put a lot of reels up there. That's just Bill Lake Comedy.
Okay.
And I'm on Facebook as well if anybody still
So
uses
three
Facebook.
L's in the middle for anybody who's trying to figure that out.
Yes. Yeah, that's the tricky part.
Triple L. Nice.
Yeah, thanks for
Uh,
it's nice talking to
okay.
you.
I think we got a nice thank you from Mark in the Carolinas. And yeah, Bill, this was terrific. We're going to end the broadcast right now. Thanks everybody for tuning in to Always Booking Comedy. We'll be back next